Good afternoon and welcome to Right Now. I'm Chris Reddy here on 95.3 FM WILI. This is our Thursday, February 12th episode of the show. As always, if you would like to listen to the show in its entirety at any other time, you can always go to WILI.com, go to podcasts, scroll all the way down through the menu, and you will see Right Now at the bottom. You can select one of our previous episodes to listen to at your leisure. You can also go to YouTube, and you can see this because we're recording in studio, and you can view our episodes that have been previously recorded as a video format on YouTube. Today, for February 12th, 2026, we're going to revisit with our first guest in just a moment a topic that we talked about a month ago, and we want to provide a little bit more of a follow-up here. So we're going to have joining us as a call-in guest, William Dellacamera. Good afternoon, William.
Yeah, turn the line on. Should be there.
Good afternoon, William. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you very much. Before we get into the topic that we're going to discuss with you as a guest here on the radio, can you please tell our listening audience a little bit about your farm located in Northford, Connecticut?
I have about 125-acre mixed vegetable farm in south central Connecticut in New Haven County's town of North Branford, and we're like the village of Northford. The farm's been a multi-generational vegetable farm. So we grow a lot of products, and we have a little direct market, a little CSA, a little agri-tainment, and a pretty large wholesale vegetable production.
Very good. And you are part of the Public Act 490 designation for farms that is governed by the Department of, the Office of Policy and Management and the Department of Agriculture that sets those land use values for taxation of farms. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons that I had you on the air today is because of the Public Act 490 to kind of get you caught up with what our listeners know. About a month or so ago, we did have an entire episode that was dedicated to the land use values that were reassessed as of October 1st, 2025, and that dramatic increase that farmers saw across the state with a number of the different designated land use categories that went up significantly in their tax-assessed value. So we have had an episode prior about this. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on is because you've been a very outspoken advocate for Connecticut farmers for a number of years. And I first heard your name back in 2023 and 2024 when Connecticut farmers suffered a couple of seasons of particularly bad weather conditions between flood, freeze, hail that damaged crops, and you were one of those farms that had significant losses during that time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was where you really started advocating for a lot of these farmers because you were seeing a lack of, shall I say, help from the federal government in trying to recoup some of those losses, and it's taken several years for this to actually kind of come to fruition, right?
Well, I'm going to say we're only 2/3 of the way there. That grant or coming to fruition with any money right now. So
I did hear that there was supposed to be applications available this past fall, and that was kind of postponed, and now we're waiting to see if disbursement is going to come in 2026, correct?
Yeah, so the last talk was, and we actually just started with a group the other day, is that they're going to start an application process. They had thrown around a lot of ideas, and now we start last week with a little farmer roundtable, and the farmers came up, other farmers, including myself, came up with a lot of scenarios that nobody thought of over the past 11 months. So I have a little bit of, I'm upset that this meeting that was just held a week ago wasn't held 11 months ago, because we could be way ahead of where we are now. But
sure.
It just goes to show, for the lack of better terms, it just goes to show the lack of respect that's coming from these elected and appointed officials out to the community they're supposed to serve. Is a similar problem with the PA 490 thing. So being that outspoken, I'm to the point where I'm outspoken and I'm going to keep this up. But again, there's a true systemic lack of respect that's coming from elected and appointed officials to the agriculture community that needs to be fixed. No one person is better than the next person. Right. This is not a right and left issue. This is a right and wrong issue. This is agriculture. This is the backbone of any society. So we need to get this back to a level playing field. Mm-hmm. We need a lot of transparency, and people need to be held accountable for their actions.
And that was one thing that I heard in speaking to farmers with this PA 490 assessment that came out last October, was that they were greatly surprised because the survey process that they were used to was not implemented this last reassessment, which occurs every 5 years, and that it in fact was extremely easy for farmers to overlook this survey that came in the mail, and therefore not provide useful information when the Department of Agriculture and the Office of Policy and Management did these reevaluations.
Yeah, there's a lack of accountability of how this was put out. There's a lack of any transparency to the agriculture community now with a lot of things, and we're in this age of social media and everything's fast paced. So maybe years ago when you had coalitions and bureaus that were part of this process, it was a little slower times. People made phone calls, maybe stuff was mailed differently, but now there's just such a range of the elderly farming community that wants paper and pencil and phone calls. That's what they want, but they're getting QR codes on a mailer or something over social media or email, and it needs to be done and done right. I get that, but there's a lot of holes in this whole thing, and
sure.
it's like the Swiss cheese theory. Once all those holes line up, and that's when problems occur. If you line all these problems up, then you end up with this quote unquote skewed data, and we end up where we are. With a PA 490 with a skewed assessment. Well, that's what we're being told. Is there more to this story? So let's find out. We have mechanisms of freedom of information, and those have all been put out there. And I think this whole 490 thing is two-sided. Yes, we need to fix it. We know that. That's number one. But two, at the end of the day, the farmers want to know what went wrong. We want to know what, because we can't correct anything that we don't know what went wrong. So right. We need to be told, why it really happened. And I know you talk to other people, and we all feel the same. That yes, we've been given the excuse of the skewed data, but there was also human element involved in this. There was people involved that should have questioned it long before it was put out the first time, and then it was questioned, and then it was put out again, and it was reduced, but not even enough to be considered a reduction. And nothing was done until, and I'm glad, the Kim there that stood up, because I stood up for agriculture, for the disasters, and it's a hard thing to do, but, when you have your community behind it, which everyone, helped and got behind her and pushed it through and made it heard. Because at the end of the day, the General Assembly or in Congress of the United States, they only respond to outside pressures. They don't respond to anything else. So unless we go as a community, an agriculture community, and pressure from all directions, we're not going to get results we want, or we're not going to get any response at all, which is, kind of sad, but.
No, I get it. And one of the things that we did see was that there has been some response here in Connecticut. And like you said, they did adjust those values, but they're still at a very, very elevated tax value rate compared to prior to this October 1st, 2025 reassessed value. They corrected some of them, but there's still a lot of issues that farmers are facing, and farmers are still facing 200 or 300% property tax increases in a single year, right?
Well, they corrected them and republished them, and then with Kim's with her push of having that farmers forum up there in Hartford, just prior to that, the governor rescinded them back to 2020. Okay. So the towns have to use their 2020 assessment for tax year this year. But I've seen on social media where someone is claiming, I believe they were claiming Cromwell is saying they're using the 2025. Well, I think there's a statutory issue right there. The assessor could believe what they want, and then they could say that, but statutorily, I believe it's been rescinded by the governor, so they could do what they want, but I think they're going to find themselves in legal trouble now. Yeah. Just to touch on the subject of legal trouble and tax assessors, tax assessors are given the ability to weigh in their own personal opinion on a lot of these assessments. Like they're given a pretty broad stroke, and our farm had become a victim of that 23 years ago. That the assessor decided she was going to do something, so it was appealed, and the appeals board basically said, "We're not going. We'll hear your appeal, but we're already voting against you because we believe it's okay." Well, out of principle of the whole situation, they were brought to court, and luckily there was a lawyer that was ambitious enough to try a tax case, because tax cases are usually a muddied up mess, right. And he won. Not only did he win, but he won an appeal in the circuit, and then he won an appeal at the Supreme Court. And the farm won, and it was, the briefs are all still there. Case law was made. Fast forward to 2025, the city of Meriden, Connecticut did the same thing, same case to a similar piece of property to a farmer in their town. Case law, they still want to fight it. They still want to appeal it. How are you going to appeal it? It's already been ruled on. So, right.
Yeah, there's already that precedent there.
Yeah, the precedent's there. So the assessor gets in their head that they're going to do what they want, and then they know when they know they're wrong, they don't even back off when they know they're wrong. So, I think that hopefully out of this Public Act 490 revision, whatever we get now here, that also we can get some stuff that goes into these assessors' offices and say, look, this is farmland. This is how it's going to be done. You're not going to be given the broad stroke to make your own assumptions that I'm going to charge this farmer this, that, and the other thing. Because some people have said, and I was questioned in another interview about it, but you also got to remember that a farmer, most all farmers in this state have a personal life outside of their farm. And when I say that, just remember that they own a private house. They probably own private vehicles. So they're paying taxes just as if any other citizen in town for the services they might need, school, fire, medical. Now, farmland is not putting a child through school, and that's one of the biggest tax burdens in towns we have right now. So that's why 490 needs to be there. We also need 490 to make sure that it's used as a land preservation tool, that farmers aren't being taxed to death where they're going to sell their land. So when people say, "Oh, you farmers get all your everything for free," well, we don't, because we do have private lives, right? And we put money back into the economy. We stimulate the local economy in many ways, especially if we have agritainment or direct sale farm stands. People are coming into town. Right. They might come for our agritainment and buy something at the gas station. They might have dinner in town. There might be a restaurant they go to, then they come to our farm. So we're in an economic stimulus. So even though we're getting that tax break, remember, a lot of your production facilities, your industrial facilities, businesses, they get huge taxes that no one sees, and no one sees them because they're inside of a building. Yep. And we're open space. So you see us as, tax-free. Well, a lot of these private businesses have a lot of tax, incentives they receive.
Right. Yeah, tax breaks. Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you providing us with some more input into this and telling us a little bit about your farm. Can I ask you just a couple of questions before we end our segment here? We're looking now at the taxed value assessed practices back to the 2020 level. Do you expect to see similar changes if we do not get this under control in 2030? Do you expect that this is just what the state is kind of pushing farmers towards, is increasing taxes?
Well, taxes are always going to obviously increase because of the cost of doing any business. I think there was the working group was met the other day, and there was the public could listen in on it, mm-hmm. And I think it's going to have to change due to the times, but hopefully they didn't really talk how is it going to be legislated? Is it going to be an opinion? Is it going to be law? Is it going to be how are they going to do it? But I'm hoping they put something in that specifically spells out how they're going to do this. Mm-hmm. Because you also got to remember the value of the land is farmland. There is value, but the farmland only produces that value if the farmer's farming it that way, right? So
correct, yeah.
You might have an open field that has the potential to, let's just use an easy number, make $5,000 mm-hmm. of revenue for that farmer. But if he's a good farmer, he can get $7,500 out of it. So there's a difference, and there's a difference of other things with that land. So I hope they spell it out really specific, and I hope it's just a easy check mark for, policy and management to just look at it and say, we're going to go up this much incrementally mm-hmm. and make it easy, no more than this, but no less than that. I'm sure they could do something along those lines. But the 490, it's always something we're going to have to keep our eyes on, just like everything else in the state right now. Anything we do, we have to keep our eyes, because stuff will get done behind our backs, and then it's hard to fix it.
Yeah, of course. Do you feel like the state is willing to work with and allow farmers to participate in this process moving forward?
I think so. Even with last year, the in the General Assembly, some of the legislation that came through was the most well-received legislation for agriculture in a long time. A lot of senators and representatives put a lot of time into making like a mini farm bill for the state of Connecticut. I spent a lot of time up there last year advocating for farmers, and I hope I'm going to this year, and I hope to see some new faces up there advocating for agriculture to keep it going in this direction. So I do see a lot of elected and appointed officials working to better agriculture, but there's just a few in there I don't trust. There's just I see everything going in a direction, and all of a sudden, here it is, something, and you're like, where did this come from? You could do 10 good things, but one bad thing will set us back way too fast. Mm-hmm. So
one thing that I talked about in the last show that we had on PA 490 was how we've had some very significant revisions in housing legislation. And this idea that Connecticut is going to legislate affordable housing, and that farmland looks like prime development property. Do you feel that that's kind of something that is contributing to this in the state of Connecticut?
I suppose it could be, but
It seems like you hear about stories,
that's the
especially
way-
when you look at other states like New Jersey, where they're
with the eminent
taking
domain
farms
down
on
there.
eminent domain to put in
yeah.
affordable housing. Are we kind of like looking at what might be happening to Connecticut in years?
So actually, I mean, I don't know what's going to become of it. I know there was a press conference yesterday between the United States Department of Agriculture and why the now I guess it's called the Department of War, but they have come up with 4 pillars of like national security, and one of them was that the USDA is going to make sure they enforce a program where farmland is not taken for eminent domain. So, I mean, that's a national thing, but I really think, like, at that point, like I talked about freedom of information before, and this and that, and the other thing, the people that are pushing for these housing bills, if they start taking farmland by eminent domain, they think it's time we bring back tar and feather, and just tar them and feather them and put them in, town square, and show that these are the people that are inevitably taking away what's feeding you and making it into houses. So then where are you going to get the food from? Oh, well, we could get it from another state. Well, is that what you really want?
Yeah.
So if you want to make Connecticut this housing metropolis with no farms, well, so be it. But I think it's the wrong thing to do. And I don't think farmers will stand for it eventually. And I know I won't.
Yeah, me neither. And I am from eastern Connecticut, where you can't drive a mile without passing by a farm in my towns out here. So we're with you, and 100% supportive of what you guys are doing, advocating for the farmers in Connecticut. Obviously, locally sourced food is absolutely vital to the health of our state. And, I applaud you for what you do as a farmer in Connecticut. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on, William. William Dellacamera. He's the owner of a farm down in North Branford, Connecticut, and we've been talking about PA 490 here on Right Now at 95.3 FM, WILI. And as I want to say, as we're going to our break here at the top of the hour, you can always listen to any of these previous shows on WILI.com. Go to the podcasts menu, and you can scroll down, look for Right Now. You can also go to YouTube and search Right Now, and you can see the in-studio videotape recording of our episodes at any time. We're going to take a break for our commercials. Thank you very much for being on the radio with us, William. I hope you have a good afternoon. Welcome back to Right Now on WILI 95.3 FM. My name is Chris Reddy. In our second segment here this afternoon, we are going to have a guest with us who is a state representative from the 44th District of Eastern Connecticut. She represents Killingly, Plainfield, and Sterling. This is her 5th term at the state legislature in the House. We have with us State Representative Ann Dauphinais. Good afternoon, Ann. How are you?
Turn on the thing.
There you go. Good afternoon, Ann. How are you?
I'm great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Now we're all set. I appreciate you being on this afternoon. For those of you listening, Ann was actually one of the driving forces behind my campaign a couple years ago. And when I say that, I mean she was the one that was cracking the whip and keeping me in line the entire time. So she was a great help to me, and I really appreciate you coming on the air. And I think that it's very appropriate since we just started this short legislative session for 2026 just last week. Can you tell our listeners about your role as a state representative and what committees you sit on?
Sure. So this is my 10th year, my 5th term. I serve in the 44th District House of Representatives, and I serve Sterling, Killingly, and Plainfield. And I'm currently sitting on Education, Public Health, and I'm ranking on the Children's Committee.
Great. And that was some of the things that I asked you to come on and talk about are, even though this is a legislative session that really deals with budgetary and appropriation adjustments being the short session, there is a lot of stuff that's going on that is very important for people, both in the aspect of children, in the aspect of affordability in Connecticut this session, and also with regard to some of the vaccine schedules that are being discussed through the Department of Health. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. I know that you have some things that you want to bring up on regard to all these topics. And when this legislative session started, one of the first things that came out, and this is something that I've talked about a number of times with regard to affordability, was the remainder of the $500 million that was appropriated during the emergency session last November. The remainder of that, almost $330 million, is one of the first things that came up as a legislative item. Do you want to talk a little bit about that to our listeners?
Sure. So that was what we had special session about last week, and we were called in to just vote on that item alone. It was an emergency certification bill. So for those that don't know, it's a bill that's not gone and had a hearing. It's considered something that we need to push through quickly for whatever reason, right? Deadlines or the like. I mean, they sometimes, I think, make things up. But for this particular one, I think the allocation of money was to expire, so they wanted to extend it. But furthermore, they wanted to extend it and really give the governor almost complete control over where it's going to go, who it's going to go to, and how much, and extend spending that last $330 million. So there's we have a regs review committee who will kind of be like an oversight on that, but really it's the governor that's going to be driving the decisions on that. And that was really the opposition on at least the House floor with regard to not wanting that to pass, having somebody have such power over that kind of money. And it's our money, right?
Right, yeah.
And we felt like we needed to have really a lot more input in on it than what they were asking for. So that's kind of the summary I have. Do you have anything more to add to that, Chris?
No, that actually sounded really great, and I appreciate you clarifying that. It does, from what I heard, yes, February 3rd was the deadline set from last November when that $500 million that was supposed to cover federal funding that was going to be withheld from Connecticut, and that only $170 million of that had actually been spent between the interim of time from November during that emergency session until February 3rd, and that because of this February 3rd deadline, that's why it was brought up, as you said, in this emergency session to start off this legislative session. But you're right, no transparency, no accountability in the actual allocation of these funds. It went through as an emergency certification, so we didn't have the opportunity to listen to anybody who would oppose this money being spent. And I agree that you're kind of giving unilateral control to one person to oversee the spending of a huge amount of Connecticut taxpayer money.
Yeah, I might add a little bit more. It's taken on the name as a slush fund, and I agree with that, and I'll tell you why. I mean, initially, I think people were concerned. There was talks about people not getting their SNAP funded and some other things that people were kind of dependent on and hadn't planned on not getting. So there was this fear of not getting that money around the holidays and going into winter. And so, there was this talk of they needed to be able to access this money. Of course, the budget was not settled. The federal budget had not been settled yet. So it seemed a little bit, if you will, a little bit more urgent. And so calling it an emergency fund might have been more appropriate at that point in time. But the budget's been passed. And now we're sitting here on $330 million of the taxpayers' money. He can kind of do whatever he wants with it, right? I mean, all of those things that we're supposed to have brought on this emergency fund and the need for it have been settled out. So that was the other question that came up. Why do we still need to do this? So it's with a little oversight and a concern of the need for it, to be honest. So that's kind of, I'll just add that in.
Okay. To move on to another topic that we want to talk about here, and this is the House Bill 5044, which has to do with not only mandates for vaccine schedules for children, and we heard in, I believe it was October of last year, that Connecticut was forming or becoming part of the Northeastern Public Health Collaborative. Actually, I think that was September, and then October, the Governor's Public Health Alliance was the second thing that the state of Connecticut entered into as, I'm going to describe it as basically a regional CDC.
And I think that's a good name, yep.
Yeah, and that we now are looking at, and they're claiming that they're using this as science-based information to make vaccine decisions, but they're now overriding federal authority that we've seen in the past. And don't we already have laws that are on the books that allow the state of Connecticut to revise schedules if science or if something changes?
Well, we sort of do. And let me just back up just a little bit for those of you that don't know. So just a few short years ago during COVID, the state of Connecticut revered what the CDC said, right? It recommended that people get the COVID vaccine. There was a big rush on that. People were in a panic, and that was what the CDC was recommending. Now the CDC has changed quite a few things, including the COVID recommendations, and the state of Connecticut seems not to like what they're saying. So they're kind of decided that they want to break away from that, and I think you described it as a coalition or, our own, if you will, CDC type of grouping. And so what they did a few years ago was they allowed the commissioner, they gave her, if you will, authority over the vaccine schedule, but it had to also pass through the regulation committee, regs review. Now what they want to do is take that piece away, so the commissioner would have complete authority over what would be added and taken away to our vaccine schedule. Solo authority without any checks and balances, right?
Yep.
Which is quite offensive, really. And I think, Chris, you and I have talked about this many times. When we talk about medicine, vaccines, medical choices, and, some people will argue, well, the science is settled. Well, we know the science is never settled. We also know historically that when people go for medical treatment or medicines or anything, they used to be often encouraged to get a second opinion, right? Because there are different opinions out there. So to argue that the science is settled on one opinion, in my opinion, is just so wrong. And by the way, I'm a nurse by career, so I'm also well informed about the medical industry, the medical how people are treated, that sort of thing. And I always believe that people should do their own research and be able to seek out a second opinion and make their own medical choices. This would give the Department of Health, the commissioner, the ability to on her own completely make decisions on what goes on that schedule. And the bill is a little concerning because it added in the word residents. So many of us, it kind of raised our eyebrows and said, is this now going to include more than just children, the adults as well?
Right.
So what that might look like, right, is in a workplace, if they mandated that, for example, every adult get the flu vaccine. They could mandate that businesses must require their employees to get the flu vaccine or the COVID vaccine or the HPV or whatever that the commissioner decides is what she wants on that schedule.
Now, isn't the commissioner of the Department of Health also able to purchase vaccines for the state of Connecticut?
As I understand it, yes.
So now you have the person who is able to purchase vaccines to be held by the state of Connecticut, also the one who's mandating which vaccines are going to be administered.
Yes.
That seems very much like a conflict of interest also.
It all does. And again, it's so near and dear to my heart because I've seen so many different people have, different results with medications. And I think it's so very, very, very important that we be allowed to make those decisions that we think are best for our family, right? When there's risk, there should always be choice. And there's, you know this too, Chris, we know that even over-the-counter medications, if you have a blazing headache and you want to go and get something for your headache that's over-the-counter, you can read Advil or Tylenol or any of those things, and you're going to look at it. You're going to look at the side effects, and it's going to say nausea and stomach upset or whatever it says, right? And you're going to say, yeah, my headache is so bad, I'll take my chances. And that's kind of what we want with everything, right? Yeah, I know, but I feel like this isn't really important, and I'll take my chances. And what they're doing is they're literally in front of our eyes, bit by bit, taking away those choices for those of us in Connecticut.
And I was actually going to mention that because historically we've seen that policy change in Connecticut doesn't come in one big fell swoop. It's step by step and incremental, right? Yes,
absolutely. And you know, I'm glad you brought that up because you did mention we're in a short session. So it's a little, I'm a little bit curious as to where all of this is going to go. And what I mean by that is that it's also election year. So people, number one, time is not on our side because it's short session. Two, they're supposed to have some kind of a budgetary element to them, which many don't, and we know that. Yep. And then three, the sitting legislators want to get reelected, right? So they're going to decide how far to push this. So it'll be interesting to see how far they push any of these controversial bills.
Yeah, yep. But they are going to offer us $200 as some breadcrumbs, right?
Absolutely ridiculous. And you know what? Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I at first I thought, wow, what a gimmick. And then I thought more about it, and I thought, this is what they do in Connecticut. We don't solve any problems. We don't do anything that makes things get better. We throw stuff at it. And so now whether it's $200 or $2,000, right? Let's say it were $2,000, we're still not fixing the root cause of this, right?
Yeah.
We might be band-aiding it by giving people a mere $200 crumbs throwing at them, which I would argue most people can't buy a week's worth of groceries for $200. So it's just absurd what's coming out of Hartford and what their solutions are to fix some of these problems that are over the top in this state.
One of the craziest ones, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, one of the craziest ones I was just reading about was that they are now going to task state troopers paid overtime to sit at bottle redemption centers to make sure that people aren't crossing from Massachusetts and Rhode Island trying to scam us.
Oh, my God. So it's funny you said that, too, because when that bottle bill came up a few years ago, the argument was made and loud and clear that this was going to happen. And here we are, sitting here a few years later with that very problem.
Just amazing. And they're... like our state troopers, we're already short 300 state troopers across the state of Connecticut right now, I think. And now they want to task these guys with something as stupid as monitoring bottle returns at redemption centers.
And you know, our resources are already so thin, and, you know, they're already understaffed and overworked, and now we're going to add that. And all of this is at the cost to the taxpayers.
Yep.
So we have to pay this bottle deposit, and now we're going to have to pay police to make sure we get the money that we're supposed to get back, and nobody's cheating us on that money. You can't make this stuff up.
I know. It's crazy.
You just cannot make this. And you, Chris, you and I could talk for hours. This is a quick show, and we're hitting just tidbits of a few topics, not even really digging deep into them. But this could go on and on and on and on. And while we're on, I really encourage everyone listening, please go on the Connecticut General Assembly website. Go on there. There's a schedule of events, and every single day you'll see the calendar of events and what committee is having public hearings, and look at their agendas. Look at the bills that are coming up that they're going to be talking about in committee. Please consider giving testimony on those. Or if you're a first-timer, at least start listening to them on CTN.
Yep.
It's broadcasted live, and get familiar with them. But, since COVID, they've made video conferencing available to us for testimony, and you can literally give testimony from your home or from your job or wherever you are, from your car. So there's a lot more opportunity to become active and engaged in some of these horrific bills.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll continue talking about that. We have about 10 minutes left, Ann. And you and I, after last week's show, I talked to you because I had brought up some concerning issues around the Trust Act. And I wanted to kind of give people two little bits of update for something that I brought up,
Sure.
and you can comment on this also. I don't know if you heard about this one, Ann. This actually just happened 2 days ago. But if anybody's been following, through the beginning of the year, homicides in D.C., Washington, D.C., down dramatically. Like, they went for, I think, 3 weeks without a single homicide, which was the first time in years this had happened. On February 2nd, there was a homicide in D.C. A woman was shot on the street. Well, it turns out that the suspect was just arrested 2 days ago in Middletown, Connecticut.
Wow.
Why are we having murder suspects from other states? Just like I said last week, why are these people coming to Connecticut? What is it about Connecticut? It's not like all these criminals, and this has nothing to do with immigration. I'm not saying anything about that. Just what is bringing people to Connecticut except for the lax laws, the Trust Acts, all the police accountability acts that allow these people to thrive in an environment where they feel that they can hide.
That's and you weren't even talking about the illegals, which is a whole other story, and the whole denial that we're a sanctuary city or state. But we have, since I've been in my 10 years, every single session, we make it easier and easier and easier for criminals. Right? We're releasing them. We're making their what do you call it? Their time in prison less, or they don't go to prison. It's ongoing. We make it harder and harder for police to be able to, take care of the criminals like they need to. Right? We've talked about you can't even search their car anymore, even if they give you permission. That list goes on and on and on. Yeah. There's so many things, but it's not even with the police, and I know we're talking about crime right now, but even in our schools, we took the ability away for teachers to be able to take away recess from children, and now we're talking about the inability to suspend a child.
Yeah, I did hear that.
I don't know if you heard that, but my point is that it's all connected, right? We're doing this. There's no consequences for any bad behavior anymore.
That is absolutely true.
And we're also taking away the ability for those that are the enforcers of bad behavior, or those that are the adults in the room, to be able to have some consequences, right?
Yeah.
There's no consequences.
Yep.
None.
Yep. And I saw that as a first responder for years and years and years, where people, committed crimes, and in no time at all, they were back on the streets. And, the rate of recidivism is unfortunately higher than I think it should be, and that we've, allowed a lot of people to get away with a lot of bad things and not face the consequences that they should.
Yeah, I see it in the schools. I see it here. I see it. You see it everywhere. It's becoming a big problem. I
want to share one more thing with you because we have about 5 minutes left here, and this is something that actually was brought to my attention by Senator Jeff Gordon. And This just happened yesterday, actually, in the town of Tolland, just a little north of us here on the opposite side of the UConn campus. It turns out, and from what I understand, the first time that anyone in the legislature or from the town of Tolland was aware of this was yesterday. But apparently the state of Connecticut judicial branch signed an agreement to purchase a piece of property on Marrow Road, which is Route 195 in Tolland. So right through the center of Tolland, off of the highway, off of 84. The intent in purchasing this property, and all done in secret, is that they plan on building a 20-bed criminal juvenile detention center for serious offenders.
Oh,
Okay?
I did not know that.
There was no notice to local legislators. Apparently, Senator Gordon said that in his post yesterday. Town officials, Tolland taxpayers, nobody was notified. The state now won't even answer questions about this, citing a non-disclosure agreement between the state judicial branch, the state of Connecticut, and the seller of the property. Isn't this very much what we see happening over and over and again in Connecticut, where they try to obscure something going on, and only once it gets to this point, we're almost past where there's an opportunity for anybody to speak up against this?
We see it all the time, Chris, all the time. And I think it goes, there's so many things I could share with you. And maybe when we have more time on another, I'd like to get Dr. Steve Perry on your show to talk about some big issues. And you spoke about Middletown with a school in Middletown and the games that are played, right, and done behind back doors.
Yeah.
And like you said, nobody knows. And I think we're going to see more and more of that coming, but it's going to kind of be more in your face now with the bill 8002, with the housing bill, right?
Right.
Where people are going to take over property, but now it's going to be allowed. Before we'd find out and we'd voice our opinion and bring it to town meetings. Now they're just going to be large and in charge and tearing through. And it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that this is coming in at all. And I think we're going to see more of that with this new takeover of our land bill.
We spent an entire episode talking about the housing bill in 8002 a couple of months ago. And it's definitely something we have to speak on again, because you're right that it's taking away all of that local zoning control. Why are we even electing planning and zoning officials in our towns if they're not going to be able to protect our towns from this type of development if it's not wanted?
Yeah, I was talking to Rep. Dubitsky yesterday, and we were digging into the housing bill a little bit, and he was sharing some things because he's a little bit more well-read on it than I am, and I was even more appalled. I was like, I didn't realize that. So it goes so deep. The issues go so deep.
Mm-hmm.
I really thank you for doing this show. I think it's an opportunity for everybody to get educated. And again, I'm going to encourage everybody to become activated on some of these issues, pay attention, and testify.
Mm-hmm. And really with social media, I see it all the time now where you can go on and there's a lot of people talking about some of these very bad legislative bills that are coming out of Hartford. And, that's where you can kind of get an idea of whether this is something that you feel passionately about and if you want to become involved in. But like Ann said, the CT Network is a place that you can go and watch all of the committee meetings live, listen to the bills being brought up and then argued. You also have the opportunity to either go there and provide testimony in person, or you can do testimony through Zoom. And, that's something that the last legislative session in 2025, there was times where we would have hundreds of people that would be waiting either in person or on Zoom to have their opportunity to provide testimony. And that is how the individual can be heard and have your opinion on some of these bills brought right to the legislators. The legislators do read those and use that to form their opinion. So that's a great point that you bring up, and I think that's definitely something I'm going to keep pushing in the future for our listeners. Thank you very much for being on the air with me this afternoon, Ann. I hope you have a great rest of your legislative session and that you get a lot accomplished down there in Hartford. We'll have you on again very soon. This has been you're welcome. This has been the Thursday, February 12th episode of Right Now with Chris Reddy on 95.3 FM. WILI. Before I sign off, I do want to say thank you to one of our corporate sponsors, Wyndham Industries, Building Strong Foundations for Tomorrow. I will be on again next week, Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m., and also you can check out Mike DeSaunier's new show on Mondays, Unfiltered, from the same 3 to 4 p.m. time slot as mine. I will talk to you all next week.